Hello ladies and gentlemen, Richard here, the creator of the Top Hat Gaming Man. And whilst I usually bring you in-depth documentary style content every Sunday, unfortunately for a change I've not managed to put anything out this weekend, simply due to the fact that I am putting out a really long episode next weekend for you to enjoy. So instead today I am joined by my wife, who too now has a YouTube channel. So let's hear a little bit about your channel to my audience.
Hello, I'm Lady Decade. Some of you may already know who I am, and I am quite new onto YouTube. Obviously, my videos that I have been putting out are in particularly high quality for someone who's got a channel as young as mine, but some of you may already know that I've worked behind the scenes on Top Hat Gaming Man since the beginning, so I have had a little bit of a step up that a lot of other new creators wouldn't have had. But so far I've done quite well, I feel, on my videos. All of them, apart from one which has got about 70 views to go, have already got over 1,000 views. One of which already has 5,000 views, which is my video about the Sega Saturn. So if I was you, I'd get over there as soon as you finish on this video and check it out.
So yes, if you like in-depth content similar to which I put out, you can also find it now over on the Lady Decade YouTube channel as well. As she just told you, she's been working on my channel since day one, so she's obviously the lady who's been filming the likes of handhelds around the world and all of my other escapades all over the globe, I suppose. So today we might as well get on to the topic, and that is discussing, is the Nintendo 3DS even better than the Super Nintendo? For me personally, when people used to ask me what's your favourite system of all time, I would always go to my stock answer of the Super Nintendo, and there are a lot of reasons as to why. And firstly, it was the system that really solidified me as a regular gamer. Sure, before that I had an Amstrad, but it was just kind of like a device in my room I would use willy-nilly. And then a little bit older, I played on my friend's Mega Drive, and then ended up with a Super Nintendo, and the rest is history. And I'll go into a little bit more with regards to why I like the Super Nintendo. But first, what are your thoughts on the Super Nintendo?
For me, the Super Nintendo I did have experience with when I was a little girl growing up, in the sense that my nan had one, and I've got some very fond memories of playing the likes of Donkey Kong with my nan. So it holds a lot of nostalgia for me in that respect, but it wasn't until I was much older that I really got into gaming. So I don't hold for the Super Nintendo the nostalgia that perhaps you would, but when you look at the 16-bit generation, I think it's probably the best looking for that generation. Well, I mean, it's a handsome generation as it is, especially prior to the ugly 3D polygon graphics. But
well, it is the best system of the period, because obviously the Super Nintendo is a few years newer than the Mega Drive, so they had somewhat of an upper footing in that area, especially. But for me, the Super Nintendo tops the likes of the Mega Drive, simply due to the fact that most of the Mega Drive games are highly arcade influenced, meaning most of them don't feature save functionality, which means the gaming dynamics are very different to what you could find on the Super Nintendo, with many of them featuring save batteries, which meant you would start a game and then you'd go back to it and slowly make your way through it, where most Mega Drive games, they were designed to be completed in one long sitting. So that makes it a very different system in terms of the library, in my opinion. And a reason as to why I'd always put it as one of my favourites is it's aged a lot better than what came before it and what came after it. Like, a lot of 8-bit systems look horrible today to go back to, especially games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. You get more than a few sprites on the bloody screen, and then you're stuck with so much flicker that the games just look disgraceful. And then if you go past the Super Nintendo into the 32-bit, 64-bit era, those horrible, ugly polygon games, what you grew up with, are absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. So your first real system, I suppose, what was yours personally, was a PlayStation, was it not?
it was indeed, yeah. The PlayStation, again, was something that I inherited from my nan when she had decided to swap her normal PlayStation for a PlayStation Mini. So I ended up getting her old one, which had Resident Evil stickers all over it, and managed to inherit quite a few of her hand-me-down games. So for me, it was games like Croc are hugely nostalgic for me. Tekken, Tomb Raider, those are probably my top 3 most nostalgic games from when I was young.
Yeah, and speaking of your grandmother, we actually intend to get her on both of the Lady Decade channel and the Top Hat Gaming Man channel, so that gives you another reason to subscribe to that channel, because to be honest, she's quite a remarkable, unique individual, because you have all those idiots on channels such as BuzzFeed going around perpetuating these bizarre myths that apparently women didn't game at all up until very recently, which is clearly a complete lie, as she was programming on the ZX81 back in the early 1980s, and she owns a PlayStation 4 today and has owned games consoles in every generation ever since. And how old is she?
Well, she was born 1940, so at the time you're watching this, so she's going to be 79 this year.
And she's still a regular gamer, so this thing about women have never gamed is literally bollocks, perpetuated by these strange websites who look at things through their progressive lenses, as we've discussed on these channels previously. So, we've been bigging up the Super Nintendo a lot, and we've not actually gone on to talking about this quite as much. And as great as this is, personally, I think this system's topped it. Like, I always said this was the greatest games console ever, and this is now one of my favourites. So if you're going to say what is the greatest Nintendo system of all time ever, because it does get a little bit grey when you start bringing all the companies into the picture, but I would say the 3DS is at least the greatest Nintendo console of all time, simply because a console, in my opinion, or handhelds, quality is completely dependent on the library of games, and I feel now the 3DS has the strongest library of games. So you've had obviously a lot of experience with the 3DS as well, especially due to the fact that you've travelled around the bloody world with me. So handhelds, if we wanted to game, were our only way to game. So we're extremely experienced with 3DSs. So what are your thoughts?
This genuinely is, if someone says to me, what is your absolute favourite, I'm going to say console as well as handheld, I will always say the 3DS. Because, like you say, it's something that I've been able to take around the world with me. If I've got a long flight, the battery lasts no matter how big a game I'm playing. Especially something like Xenoblade Chronicles, which is probably my all-time #1 most favourite game ever. And I just played the hell out of it. I've got, this is mine. This one is actually an NTSC version, which I bought in Delaware.
Yeah,
and
so we never had to pay any tax, which was lovely.
Yeah, and I've also got a limited edition Majora's Mask version for obviously all of my PAL games, which was brilliant. I mean, on my PAL version, I had Hyrule Warriors, and I had the I can't think what the program is called on it, but where it records your steps and records if you've walked past someone. So I got lots of sort of extra gifts and DLC and extra money for Hyrule Warriors, which was brilliant because it was just closed in my bag as I walked around Chicago or as I walked around Philadelphia. It's just brilliant. Everything about this is fantastic and is so powerful as well.
Going back to the Super Nintendo and its quality of games, as I said, it's literally the pinnacle of 2D gaming in my experience. And a lot of Nintendo's greatest IPs, a lot of people would argue that the appearances on the Super Nintendo were the series' most finest, and there's a strong case for that. But let's talk about Super Mario, for example. Super Mario All-Stars, that combination pack, and Super Mario World. I don't think 2D Mario games have ever got any better. Perhaps Mario games in general have never got any better, especially when it comes to Mario World. That game is a masterpiece. But there's some great Mario games on the 3DS as well. Like, you've got new Super Mario Land 3D, which was pretty amazing when it first came out, especially when you take into account that this device can actually be played in 3D. All those years ago, when this system came out, the 3D functionality was fun, and it was definitely something that really stood out. Don't really turn it on anymore, to be honest, but Mario 3D Land, decent game. And then you've got new Super Mario Bros. 2 as well. It's okay, it's just one of the many new Super Mario Bros. Games. So when it comes to Mario Bros. Platforming, Super Nintendo, I'd say, has the edge. Mario Kart. You had Super Mario Kart on here, which has aged pretty badly these days. So you haven't got much reason to play Mario Kart on a Super Nintendo. Mario Kart 7, on the other hand, really decent outing. So if you're going to play a Mario Kart game, you're much better going towards the 3DS than you are a Super Nintendo. But let's just keep going from franchise to franchise. Again, Link to the Past, a game which many people would classify as the greatest Zelda game of all time, but others would perhaps tell you that the Ocarina of Time is the greatest Zelda game ever. But you've got a spiffing, updated 3D version of Ocarina of Time on this, Ocarina of Time 3D. But apart from that, you haven't only got one Zelda game like got on this, you've got 3 of the bloody buggers. So you've got your Ocarina of Time 3D, you've got an updated Majora's Mask 3D, and most importantly of all, you've got a Link Between Worlds, which amazingly is actually called A Link to the Past 2 in Japan, because it is the direct sequel to Link to the Past. And you could make a strong case for the Link Between Worlds being just as good as Link to the Past anyway. So if we're talking you wanting to play Zelda games, you're much better playing with a 3DS now than you are a Super Nintendo. And we're just talking Nintendo IPs. If we're talking the top 3 as well, Pokemon, obviously. There was no Pokemon in the Super Nintendo era. Pokemon's a fairly new intellectual property for Nintendo if we're talking about history in the grand scheme of things. But you've got some amazing Pokemon games on that. You've got X and Y, you've got Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, and you've got the latest ones, which was Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon, and Pokemon Sun and Moon 2, Pokemon Ultra Moon and Ultra Sun, that's the titles. So a bloody ton of great JRPGs on there, which is also what this system is famous for. Have you played many of the JRPGs on this, would you say?
Only probably Secret of Mana is the only one I've had to go on, but then I ended up just playing it on the PS4.
No, that's not true. Maybe you're just getting a bit confused because you probably played them on other platforms. You've definitely played Chrono Trigger, haven't you?
Yes, I have actually. Yes. Yeah, Chrono Trigger I have. But then I've also played Chrono Trigger on a DS.
Yeah,
so
exactly. You can put it's because it's backwards compatible as well. But
yes.
the Super Nintendo's not backwards compatible with the NES. But this got access to the whole DS library too. Another reason why this is a much better system to play with today. And again, Final Fantasy VI was on this device as well. That you've played that, surely?
I have. Yes, I have, but I've never completed it.
Maybe not.
Maybe I should give that another go.
So yes, a lot of the JRPGs on this device are bloody iconic. But this has got some amazing ones too, as you highlighted a moment ago. Tell us a bit about Xenoblade Chronicles, and do you think it's the best JRPG ever?
Yes, I absolutely, wholeheartedly believe that is the best JRPG I've ever played.
Some people would argue it's an action RPG. Personally, I'd say it's a JRPG because I think the battle system is more turn-based than it is action-orientated, but some people think it's action-orientated. Tell us why you think it's so great.
For me, the battle system combined with this epic, incredible, amazing story, it is the most fantastic, iconic JRPG I've ever played. The battle system is very, very, very customizable. So for example, as you build up your levels and your characters and you focus on different trees, there's just a lot of options with your characters. You can follow them down a more melee path, or you can follow them down a more magic based path, and so on and so forth. And then the cohesiveness of the party, you build up their affinity, you build up affinity with the world around you. There's endless amounts of side questing to do.
I think more importantly than that as well, the storyline's actually fantastic as well. Like
so
Final Fantasy VII was always my favourite JRPG prior to playing Xenoblade Chronicles, and part of the reason was all the twists and turns in the story, and Xenoblade Chronicles offers all of that too, and I'd actually say it's probably twice the length of Final Fantasy VII as well. So yeah, I suppose both of these systems are great for JRPGs. We've also got on the 3DS the Yokai Watch trilogy, which again is fantastic, and you can't get an experience like it anywhere on the Super Nintendo platform. It's just a really different game. You had much fun with that one?
Oh, I really like Yokai Watch. I find it interesting because it actually gives you quite a good insight into Japanese culture, which I wouldn't have known had existed prior to playing that game. And again, it's got another cutesy anime that goes with it. It's trying to be another Pokemon style game. So for me, I really enjoy it.
What I find interesting about Yokai is, personally, I don't think Yokai is trying to be like Pokemon. Pokemon is trying to be like the Yokai mythology, because basically it's Japanese folklore, and essentially someone made the Pokedex in the medieval era just by making up and not so much making up, but cataloguing all the yokais people had come up with over the years. So Pokemon was really invented as yokais many years before and catalogued back in medieval times. So it's interesting that it's come full circle, and now we have yokai video games, I suppose. If we're still talking about JRPG, because I said this is definitely a system people associate with JRPGs, and people should associate this with them in equal measure. We have also got Bravely Default and Bravely Second, two almost Final Fantasy style games created by Square Enix in that Final Fantasy sort of ilk, which are also very good. Would you agree with that?
Yes, again, it's an interesting battle structure. It is turn-based, but probably many of you have played it. You can actually save up your turns by taking a defensive stance and then unleash a huge amount of attacks all in one go, one after the other. And again, it's very good. I find that game personally a little bit repetitive in the sense that you have to go through the same story essentially multiple times to reach the end of the game. But again, if battle mechanics are important to you, which they are for me, that is a game I thoroughly enjoy because of the battle mechanics, because of the job class systems and so on and so forth.
Something I want to talk about as well, I'm going to use the American name so this doesn't get too contrived and confusing by going between two separate names. On the Super Nintendo, you had the original Star Fox game, which is very good, but I believe it got topped just a few years later when they released Star Fox 64, obviously on the Nintendo 64. On the 3DS, they've got the most refined version of the game yet in the form of Star Fox 64 3D, which is even better than either of the previous versions. So that's another great game you can play on the 3DS, and another way you've got a big Nintendo intellectual property where the best version of the game can be experienced on this device instead. Also, what other key Nintendo franchises have we not talked about?
With regards to franchises, Nintendo eShop. You can get pretty much all of the games that are on there on the eShop.
That's true. So if you want your Super Nintendo anyway, you can get a lot of the Super Nintendo games on this device. Like you've got your Earthbounds and your blah blah blahs, and a lot of the key franchises are downloadable for fairly cheap, I would say. So, and again, backwards compatible with the DS and also a number of other systems you can download games from via the eShop, where this offers less options. Although you have got the add-on, haven't you, that allows you to play original Game Boy games. But once again, you can download a lot of the original Game Boy games on this anyway via the eShop. So again, another reason why the bloody 3DS is brilliant. Also, you've got WarioWare Gold, another one of my new favourite games on the system, which is another great variety of mini games. Actually, there's so many. Fire Emblem. You got Fire Emblem on both of these systems, and the Fire Emblem games on the Super Nintendo, they weren't even released outside of Japan. Sure, you can play them today using fan translations, what have been created, but on this device, you've got bloody loads of great Fire Emblems that have been released in the West, and all those probably top any Fire Emblem games that came out on here anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got to say, like Birthright and all of those ones are, I absolutely love them, and I like the way that they completely change the story. It's the same story, but it's the branching paths and the different ways in which you can level up your characters. You can either have a game where you can obtain more money, or you can level up easier, and then you've got the final game, what's that called again? After Conquest and Birthright, there's the third one.
Revelations.
That's it. And then you've got the combined story, and that I think is brilliant. That is a rare occasion where I thought, you know what, I will pay out for all 3 games in one go.
I was always a bit besmirched when it came to Fire Emblem games, because for some reason Nintendo kept pumping them out regular, but for some reason getting rid of Advance Wars, and I always much preferred Advance Wars games over Fire Emblem games. I just found them a little bit too Japanese, because for me personally, I do not like too much anime shoved into my face. It annoys me a little bit, personally.
I'm the opposite, I love it.
Yeah, for me, I'm not a big fan. Like, give me a more Western orientated art style, thank you very much. But those games were so good, despite the art style, I think they're even better than any of the Advance Wars games. So I would like to see what Intelligent Systems could do these days if they made some Advance Wars games on the 3DS, because sadly we haven't got any since the DS days. So I'd like to see what they could do in the ilk use that word twice, I think, in this video of the 3DS instead. That would be fantastic. Another great game, because there's just so much on the 3DS. It's underappreciated by most gamers these days. They're obsessed with PlayStation 4s and original Xboxes who won't go near handhelds for some bizarre reason. But you've also got Luigi's Mansion 2, which is essentially like the original Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube, only on bloody steroids. It's a much bigger, better game, but I do not really hear people talking about it that much. People always go on about the original Luigi's Mansion, but they rarely go on about the sequel. Why do you think that might be?
Again, I mean, this is a hugely popular device and has sold so many, but I think probably when it comes to Luigi, people always go straight for Mario, I think.
No, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I literally just think it's a case of people have got this strange bias where they want to game specifically on a television for some reason, because they just think bigger is better. Hold this for a moment. Something I've never really understood why a lot of people love really huge televisions, because personally I think the larger the television, the larger the inconvenience is actually going to be, because the larger your TV, the further you're going to have to sit away from it. So the further you're going to have to push your sofa back in your living room, thus the more space you're going to unnecessarily waste. So for me, the smaller the screen, the actually better it is, because look, I've wasted less than a foot of my lounge, whereas my television wastes up a good 5 or 6 foot. Would you not agree with that?
I think you're mental.
No! It's logic, isn't it? Small screens are better because they waste less space, so therefore, and I can take it on the go. So I've always preferred handhelds, and I've spent more time using them than I have consoles. Like, I have not even found time to play much on the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, hence why I said we're mainly talking about Nintendo consoles, because I've played all the other ones in detail, but I've not really got much time to play Xbox One or PlayStation 4 yet because they're too modern, haven't found the time.
You see, I like the 3DS in the sense that if you are playing something on the television, like you do play a lot of Wii U, then it doesn't stop me from playing a game, because I can still sit on the sofa with you, but I can play a game that I want to play without necessarily having to watch what you're playing.
I also think the 3DS, if we're talking about the greatest Nintendo console of all time, is a much, much better system than the Nintendo Switch. Firstly, because it's more comfortable. Secondly, because there's actually a sensible way of protecting the screen without having to buy anything else. I have to keep my bloody Switch in a sock. And thirdly, the battery life on the Nintendo Switch is insulting. The whole point of handheld devices is so you can take them on long journeys. And how am I meant to take a Nintendo Switch on a flight to Australia with me when that flight's like 24 hours or however long and the battery lasts about 2 hours? It's just an inconvenient device. You might as well go back to just bringing a Sega Nomad on holiday with you. The battery life is comparable to that.
Well, bearing in mind that that device is powerful enough to be playing games such as Hyrule Warriors, which you could also play on the Wii U and play on the Switch, that plays, again, Xenoblade Chronicles,
they
other
released
huge
Fire Emblem
games.
Warriors on this as well.
Fire Emblem, yes, exactly. And they're huge, huge, huge games, which that device is powerful enough to both play, but you're not sacrificing battery life.
And I've got no graphical complaints really about the 3DS, especially if we're taking into account the screen is small anyway. So yeah.
But it's small, but it's still very clear. You can still read small writing on it, and I still find that despite the small screen, it's still immersive.
So this is how I think I would like to conclude this. I would say today, if you're going to play a Nintendo console, the 3DS now offers a greater library, more depth, and a better choice of games. There's far more on it. But if we're talking about impact and what would be the other word? Impact. Longevity, and there's another word, and it's failing to roll off my tongue. I can't think of it, but anyway, the Super Nintendo is the nostalgia system, the games that have had a long-lasting effect on gaming. Iconic titles like Donkey Kong Country, Link to the Past, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Earthbound, they are just iconic titles which people constantly talk about today. I don't think the 3DS's library consists of games quite as iconic as that, but I would say they are definitely more fun to play today. And the mix of graphical styles you've got on this is absolutely mind-blowing. This is from a time period where you could do far less, so you've got mostly 2D games which are quite similar in graphical style, and you've got the odd attempt at 3D such as Star Fox, Doom, Wolfenstein, etc. But overall I think you've got a lot more graphical choice on this. You've got your simple 2D games, and you've got all the games which are in 3D environments, along with more experimental stuff as well, such as Bit Trip, Runner, etc. So yeah, more depth on this one. This is more iconic though, so I would genuinely say the 3DS is better today. And if someone said I can only have one of these systems for the rest of my life to play with the entire library of games, I would 100% choose the Nintendo 3DS, and that is without even taking the DS library into account with it, or the eShop capabilities as well. So what do you say?
I'd have to agree with you on that. That, again, I will say it again, that is my #1 all-time favourite console, not just handheld. It's my all-time favourite console. It's got my favourite library of games on it. And again, it's just, if you ignore the migraine-inducing 3D, which, let's be honest, no one uses for more than about 10 seconds, that it's close to perfect, in my opinion, as you can get on a handheld console or any kind of console.
So I think we are going to close now. As I said, I'm going to bring out a really in-depth fun video next weekend. However, if you fancy some in-depth content to tickle your taste buds, there's about 10 in-depth videos you have probably never seen over on the Lady Decade channel instead. So I highly and strongly advise you go over to that channel and hit the subscribe button, and of course the notification bell, to get all of the videos directly to your phone. The channel's going to be just as busy as mine and pumping out content just as regularly to assist myself on our quest to go full-time with the Top Hat Gaming Man channel on YouTube, which hopefully we will be able to do as of the summer. So, ladies and gentlemen, to finally close this video, let us know in the comment section which of these two systems has the best library of games in your opinion, and why. I would be curious to hear your thoughts, as would you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next time, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll be bringing out a video in the next couple of days about Croc, but not talking about the gameplay as such. I'm talking about the history surrounding it. So that's definitely one to check out, and then I'll be pumping out consistent content afterwards. Always give me a comment, give me a tweet, let me know what you want to see in the future, and I'll see you over there next time.
Okay, plug, pluggity plug. Cheerio.